control surfaces. This is a long time coming, big attempt to make atmospheric flight feel significantly different from space flight. Obviously, this didn't become a thing to consider until Planet Tech became a thing. So 2015, 2016 was when this really started to actually be a thing at all. And you'll see here that it wasn't until 2017 that they really started to get a handle on this. But even with this early model of atmospheric flight, it still wasn't entirely true to what they wanted to do. Now, we're going to skip through the different years as we get closer and closer to the current time and what is actually being done for control surfaces. This is kind of a dive into the development of it, but also it's meant to sort of speak towards what the point of it is. So here we start out with John Pritchett, who actually was a very well-liked developer who was working on the physics simulations of the game and unfortunately did not want to relocate to work with the rest of the team, was working from home at the time and parted ways with the company. He's now working on X4, interestingly enough, but here's some of what he was saying about the flight model back then. This is David Coulson. He is who took over from John Pritchett.
But we don't want it to be that you can't control it in the atmosphere, which is just not fun. We actually have had some of those issues with really small ships like the Merlin and the Gravlev bikes, because they can now fly in the atmosphere as well, and they're really small and light, and you really get pushed around a lot in like, you know, in high winds and you're moving really fast. It feels really strongly that you're not quite in control anymore, which feels really good. And it really separates the flight from being in space to being in the atmosphere, which is what the goal was.
The way I approach that actually is more through the control systems, which is what interfaces the player, or in real life, the pilot or whatever, with the vehicle. That sets limits on what they can do with the vehicle and how the vehicle performs or whatever. So you can still have realistic physics while at the same time creating more of a traditional gameplay experience through the way the controls are interpreted and the vehicle responds to the player. We
basically have this ability to specify goals in position or velocity or acceleration, and the ship will try and achieve those goals. So the most complicated one is position, which isn't used for general flight, it's more used for AI and stuff, where you say, I want to get to this goal, and the system will try and figure out how much...
Man, this game looked different back then.
...to power each thruster and everything to actually achieve that goal. We use the velocity goal and the acceleration goal for when you're actually flying around, you know, you are controlling the ship. And those controllers now basically include drag and gravity in their predictions. So if you say, hey, I want to get to 200 meters per second in this particular direction, the algorithm will look through all of the current forces that it has available and go, okay, hey, gravity is helping us in this particular direction that we're trying to accelerate, so we don't actually need to give as much thruster force. Or maybe if you're going the other direction, you need to give extra gravity to counteract the other side of gravity, which maybe your thrusters just don't have enough thrust to give enough force to counteract gravity plus what you actually want to move in that direction. And so that's now included in that core model, which is the one part of it. And the turbulence stuff is a second layer that we have on top of the flight control system. So, you know, we have the control logic, which is you or an AI give input into the system, and the system will try and figure out how to get to that configuration. And then after that, we have all the extra stuff, which is things like turbulence, just random error and stuff like that gets added on top, which is, you can think of it as like the external forces that are moving or attempting to move the ship that you are not in control of. And so obviously turbulence and wind is the big part of that one.
Okay. So that's around the verse right there. This is, if you didn't notice, this is absolutely not inside Star Citizen. You can tell from the runtime here. Sorry, let me go back to that. You can tell from the runtime down here, which you can't tell because the screen's blocking it. 46 minutes long. There used to be a lot of talking in these to describe things that generally they spend like maybe a minute going through inside Star Citizen now. But ultimately, I wanted to show you this because you can hear there's not a single mention of control surfaces or anything that might have to do with aerodynamics based around like the ship parts moving and all that kind of stuff. So they're still talking about ships as just kind of like a singular modeled plane flying through, not plane like airplane plane, but like the shape plane flying through an atmosphere and how it would react to the wind and gravity and things like that. Now here is a little bit later, just the next year, as they showed this more in practice as to where they wanted to go.
Everyone's favorite, the Aurora. So the Aurora, it's a flying brick really, isn't it? It's not really got much of a lift surface. So it flies a lot slower because it struggles to cut through the air. It's got a lot more instability, as you can see there. We're trying to yaw here, but it's just not doing it because it's hitting that wind and kicking back. Another downside to this beyond that, the thrusters have to do a heck of a lot more work just to do this.
So this is still how we fly right now, and pretty used to that pulling feeling. I remember when they brought that in, and that's what ships generally do.
Running hot, they're consuming more fuel. Doesn't mean that it's like this all the time. You can get around this to an extent. Again, bring the thrust capacity down. You're going to be flying slower.
I should add that your thrusters are doing all this work when you have a super not aerodynamic ship. Like in the Gladius, you can actually fly along stable and turn your thrusters off and the ship will glide, which obviously you can't do in the Aurora. You're going to have the thrusters working an awful lot more.
Yeah, you're going to go down.
Now, I've turned the thrusters off to glide, but I can't speak towards whether or not that had anything to do with wind resistance, as opposed to just the momentum that I had. Like, I don't think in the current game, if you turned off the thrusters on your ship, sitting still, you would start to glide away, right? That's what they're talking about with control surfaces. So that just wasn't a thing back then, as far as I'm aware.
Pretty quickly with this.
Exactly.
So let's have a look at what's going on under the hood.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of debug stuff. You can see what's going on. So the red line is the drag, and it's obviously moving around because of some of the turbulence in the air. And you roll and pitch, and you get this sudden force of lift pulling the ship up. And this, unfortunately, we couldn't have aerodynamic flight at the Drake Virtual Training Facilities today, but this difference is massive, right? If you try and strafe around and like circle strafe people in space, and you try and do that in atmosphere, it's going to go quite badly wrong for you. You need to really adjust your flight strategies in atmosphere. And the hope is that you're going to go into atmosphere, and atmospheric flight is going to be a bit more like planes, and that difference is going to be really, really drastic.
Now, that's an interesting thing to say. There are rumors swirling just from people getting to try a little bit of the very broken, very unfinished version of control surfaces that's in the ETU, just in the code. It's not actually in the game to play. And there are some possible indications that they've greatly dampened the effects of up and down strafe, which obviously would lead to, like he's saying here, a lot more flight like planes.
A bit more like planes, and that difference is going to be really, really drastic. And having that difference in gameplay is really, really exciting.
Yeah.
So we're also going to take a quick look at ship management.
Yeah. So again, how do you manage all this stuff in atmosphere?
Okay.
You got to keep.
Now, taking another step forward here. This is 4 years later. So at this point, they've gone through their big old 2020-ish, 2021-ish kind of move over to focus on Squadron 42. And I think they had a better idea of where they wanted to go in terms of ship function and management. This is when engineering was more in development. Obviously, as we're about to hear, control surfaces was getting into development. They started to have better plans for Maelstrom and stuff like that. So better times, because it's not necessarily just talking about the aerodynamics, but actually mentioning control surfaces, at least for as far as I can tell, for the first time in the history of the development.
Patiently for multi-crew gameplay. It is. Yeah. All things in their time. Let's see. Regarding flight
loud.
physics on planets, things like VTOL mode sort of lose meaning when you can just hover upside down or nose pointing at the ground. Why does it make flying easy, especially for things like the Prospector? While it does make flying easy, especially for things like the Prospector, it does break immersion. Are there any plans to force ships to stay close to horizontal at slow speeds? This would also affect ground combat and make it more necessary, as you wouldn't just be able to point straight down at targets.
It sounds like somebody asked that question like last week.
Just that one is yes. So it's probably worth explaining. So at the moment we have aero surfaces on these ships, but it doesn't fly like a plane.
We've heard this on so many times on this channel. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry if you've been here for one of these talks.
So they're still driven by the thrusters, but we do change them based on the planet they're on. So they do lose some power in atmosphere, but the thrusters to generate the performance in space have to be set in strengths. To generate the accelerations that we require in space. And then when you fly in atmosphere, you lose some efficiency, but we still need the strength of the thrusters to be able to push the ship through the air. And actually pushing aero surfaces through the air takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. So we are limited in terms of, to get the maneuverability in atmosphere currently, we still need quite strong. Well, we still need quite strong thrusters, which means you can hover quite easily. But that's not always going to be the case. So in the future, we are going to move towards control surfaces. And this is going to allow us to move the movement of the ship from thrusters to aerodynamics. So it's going to be the aerodynamics driving the maneuverability of the ship in atmosphere. And then the thrusters are just going to help a little bit. They're going to help just move the ship and allow the thruster layouts to kind of do their work. But it's not going to be the primary source. So if you're flying a Gladius, for example, and you go really slow, it's just not going to have the power to kind of keep it up. And that's where the VTOL ship's going to come in, where they can transform and fly in VTOL and hover, and that's where they'll have the advantage. But we need to add control surfaces first and work out how we do all the controls with that as well, because it's quite a complex problem to solve.
That's not fair. VTOL ships don't get that. That's not fair. All right. Couple years after that, we got to the in-game demonstration of control surfaces. So a couple jumps from the aerodynamics to the actual control surfaces being demoed. But this was CitizenCon 2023. And this is what doesn't sound like they're like feeling particularly close like in the next month on this, but I do think this might be something we see EPTU this year. At least.
Actually, Brent, can you try W and S on the keyboard instead? Oh, it doesn't work. Oh. No, it doesn't. Yep. Okay. No, the stick is affecting us. Okay. Anyways, we're gonna go down as far as possible. So the new aerodynamic system is a complete replacement of the aerodynamic system that you currently have, and you need your control surfaces to actually turn the ship around. It simulates the airflow over your lift surfaces, and therefore the slower you become, the less effective those control surfaces will be in order to turn your ship. So we can demonstrate this. So if Brent just sits here and yaws left and right, you will see he cannot go further than that. That is in line with what real airplanes also experience when they're trying to use the rudder to yaw left and right. So what Brent can do here is he can roll and he can pull to actually change his direction.
Rolling. Let's go.
Okay, so just for this demo, we added a button. The button is called Thrust Disconnect, because at the moment in the PU, when you go through a planet, you're using the thrusters to rotate. We're not doing that anymore. So Brent, disconnect the thrusters, please, and put the ship into a purposeful stall. A stall happens when the airflow over a wing ceases. Or over a lift surface ceases. And then at some point you will not have any authority anymore, and your ship will not turn and so on, and you will basically fall out of the sky. That is naturally a state that every plane wants to avoid naturally, right? And this is happening right here. Brent is not able to use the control surfaces right now because the ship is in a process of stalling. However, the airflow will pull the nose back into the wind And once you have enough speed, he can actually, well, he gets authority back over these control surfaces.
He becomes the authority figure. These control surfaces are my dependents.
That means for you as players, what you can actually do, you can do aero braking, you can do pure gliding if you want to. You can even do like competitions like, I don't know, like drop ships out of orbit and then see how far they glide. This is all possible with a new system. So let's talk about the problem. How do you come to a stop now? To come to a stop with the new system, you need to purposefully put the ship into a stall. But don't worry, when we don't have the thrusters disconnected, IFCS will help you. So you're gonna bring down the speed more and more until you're reaching stall speed, which is about now. And then the thrusters will kick in and catch you. That means, however, you are now in a state that the thrusters don't like, right? So at the moment we have turned this up, but in the future you will not be able to hold this for long.
That right there. That's such an important line. And I asked my question with the Star Citizen Live last month about this capability, but they didn't answer it. And they've been very quiet about this particular part of control surfaces. So the way this is mainly going to affect players is when you're flying into atmosphere, you're going to start to get more wear on your ship thrusters. This is all part of like the engineering aspect of the game. So if you are overtaxing your thrusters when you don't need to, they're gonna wear down faster. If they wear down faster, you don't have to fix them, but you can. You can repair them yourself. You can take them to a space station and repair them. You can get them repaired when you're at an outpost or a city. Like that's just a deterrent from doing things the wrong way. But it'll still be really noticeable. And a lot of people have been asking, what does this mean for people who are mining or need to focus more time on landing? For mining ships, if you pay close attention, I think every mining ship has VTOL thrusters. There might be one that doesn't, but I'm pretty sure they all do. Same or similar goes for salvage ships. So it's not like they're not planning for this kind of thing. And I don't think necessarily that you're just going to fall out of the sky when you're hovering. I think it's going to be
right.
Just
so
like
at the moment
this.
We have turned this up, but in the future you will not be able to hold this for long. So if Brent, for example,
So he says you won't be able to hold this for long. I don't think that you're just going to like drop out. I think there's going to be wear and tear on your thrusters, and they will just show you that, hey, you're taking more damage as you sit longer like that, giving people the ability to take as long as they need, but get a little bit more of a consequence for taking too long. That's what I think it's going to happen. He's saying here that you won't be able to hold it for too long, but CIG is being pretty lenient with players with things like this.
So at the moment we have turned this up, but in the future you will not be able to hold this for long. So if Brent, for example, now from a hover, strafe is left, more left, more left, more left. The wind flow again pulls the ship over, and you go forward again. Okay, so
This also makes me wonder, like, how much are we going to be able to use our bottom thrusters to sort of helicopter places, you know? I don't know how to describe that.
and you go
but
forward again. Okay, so now Brent, now show us how to come to a hover, and do we have some water here?
This is where I was really hoping they were going to show it, but they did not show us the shutting down thrusters or anything like that. So that's mostly what we have so far in terms of information on control surfaces. There have been little bits of information here and there over the last several months as we're getting closer and closer, but that's mostly like monthly report stuff. I would suggest checking out the monthly report videos for those tidbits. I will be covering these all the way up to release. I really like the hovering idea. I hope it's a fun mechanic and it's got a little bit of a consequence to it. But I have no idea when it's coming out. So we'll keep covering it as long as they're working on it. And I'm guessing it'll be in the monthly report in the next few days. So I'll see you guys there. Until the next time.